I'm going to go over a case study with using Squirrel 365 with business objects. The first thing is, what is Squirrel 365? What is InfoBurst XDC? And why do you need to know these two? Well, because it's using both. So first, Squirrel 365, this is our drag and drop tool, basically the counter to Excelsius going away. It's developed quite a bit since it's come along, but basically it's just a drag and drop tool. You can build dashboards, applications, pretty much anything you want your creativity can implement. InfoBurst XDC, this is a part of InfoBurst where you can create a cached data source in which you can schedule to refresh on time intervals, action intervals, different things like that. A whole bunch of different actions. We'll go over those a little bit later, but and that's part of one of the many parts of InfoBurst, and this utilizes both. Okay, so why the concept of going away from delivering just straight Webi reports to whoever was needing them? Well, Webi reports you can build dashboards out of, you can make them interactive, but the biggest cause of complaint is there's not really interaction, especially when you're bursting or sending them out in one way or another to multiple different people. It's delivered and that's pretty much it. The reports can be generic and they don't really answer questions. They don't promote business intelligence truly. And they don't, like I said, they don't really have a lot of interactivity, drill down, being able to show different views at the same time. Usually that requires more than one report. And then cost is a thing, because obviously business objects, the more licenses you need, the higher the cost. So it started out with the data was already being brought into pre-built Webi reports, and we basically started with, it was one or two reports from the beginning, just basically big data dumps that were being sent out or queried against in Webi. The thing to note with this, as long as the data is in the report, it can be consumed in Squirrel with the XDC. So to backtrack it, if you've already set up your universes within business objects to pull the data from whatever sources it is, and you can bring those fields into the report, you can put that and use that within the XDC. So you're not limited to how the report is already built. You can add on to it, and I'll actually harp on that a little bit more, because as you build things out, you learn and start to see that you need more field. You might need more fields than what you predetermined. So what we ended up doing is we took all the existing reports that we needed as our data source, added them into InfoBurst, and then used those different report tabs as the data source for the XDC. Okay, so what about the queries? So if you have any experience with Webi, you know that you have a query builder and you can set things up to filter on different levels of the reports. And yes, that does work for your reports, but it's actually a lot easier within XDC because you can do the same thing, but I feel it's a lot more intuitive because you can call. In Webi, you have your query panel where you set it for each different report tab. With the XDC, you can actually just reference those different report tabs directly in that same query panel. You don't have to go back and forth. So utilizing that, we actually created multiple queries within the XDC, and it made it so we were able to create drill downs. We were able to filter the data based on who's viewing the dashboard, so on and so forth. So there's a lot more user control was able to be creating the queries against the XDC instead of just using the straight Webi reports. Yes, so one of the main joys of XDC is being able to create multiple queries against the Webi reports. So as you can see here, I took a little screenshot. This is just an example, but this is what it looks like when you create an XDC. So I've already, fast forward, I've already added the documents from BusinessObjects into InfoBurst. I then took those reports and added those as my data source to the XDC. So now I'm here. So I have all the data has been cached because I've run that XDC. Because XDC, again, it's a cache. When you run it, it caches that current data and it stores it. It's not a live source. You have to refresh it to always have up-to-date data. And I'll get into refreshing more later. But so this is what looks like when you get to that query builder. And as you can see, the left pane, these are all the different queries that have been already written. But that's where you'll see your query list. And up on the top, that top block, that is all your fields that are being pulled from that report tab. So your InfoBurst recognizes different column names that you pull from a report. So if I have a report, A, and it has 10 columns, if I'm wanting to reference that report via this query, I'll be able to see all those 10 columns. So you're not guessing or having to cycle back and forth between business objects to see, hey, I want to call these 3 columns, but I don't remember the names of those. And you can actually interact with those. Like if I went and clicked on any of those column names, it would add them into the bottom automatically. So you can start to see how you can, being able to reference multiple reports, multiple report tabs becomes pretty easy because you literally just tell it in the query which one you want it to reference. One thing to note though is each query that you want to set up, you need to determine within that query what you want it to reference. It's not going to pull if you just say, like if I say select all from this, it's not going to pull everything from every report tab. You have to tell it which report or report tab you want it to pull from. So one of the first questions that came up when we were structuring and building this dashboard out was how do we have to have a source for each view for the XDC? So what I mean by that is, because this dashboard is designed to please higher ups, middle, and all the way down. So it's able to display through the full hierarchy. So the question was, how can we get that to work based on whichever level viewing that dashboard essentially? And so it was, do we need to create new reports? Can we use existing reports? Because one goes to an executive, one goes to a manager, one goes to an actual person level with it under that manager's scope. And we ended up basically not needing to have multiple reports for the different views. What we ended up doing was taking the existing reports and going into the query builder and removing all the filtering on it. So it was now just a straight data dump to where it's showing, everybody's and everything. And we took that off because when we come to the XDC, we basically reinserted that through the XDC and the interactivity in the dashboard. So instead of Webi automatically filtering it, we made it the user's choice of what they want to filter and how they want to filter it. It was much more ideal because again, the requirement was it needs to be a one-stop shop. We want to get away from the multiple reports being sent out to a one-stop shop. Everybody can come in if they have the URL, take a look, do what they need to do, and hop out. Okay, so how does this work? So this is one of the couple that were built, and it looks kind of plain Jane, but there's actually a lot going on behind the scenes. So the very top block, this is what I was kind of just referencing, where someone can come in higher up, middle, lower, and they can come in and see. So right now it's on all. That's where an executive would come in and they see the overall picture. So they can come in, this defaults to all, they're looking at the whole picture, they're able to see all their data, so on and so forth. But that dropdown also then has specific people that can be selected from, so everybody can see how they're doing or how they're doing as a whole. Coming down, the second one, this filters off of what is selected. So basically, the whole dashboard filters off of what's selected on top. So if you come down and go to the right, where it says by quarter, by date, there's another filter that we were able to implement by setting a query, another query parameter. So if you compare it to the Webi query panel, it's just like if you went in there and said, okay, I only want to see data for all the closers by this date range. We're doing the same thing here. And then vice versa, as it starts to tier down, all that data is filtered by those two selectors, and we're able to implement. So each of these blocks, the reason I outline them as different blocks is because each of these are coming from different report tabs. So it's the reason I outlined it like that is a lot of assumption is, okay, I need to data dump everything into one report tab. It's the only way it's going to work with XDC to get all the data that I want to see. You don't need to do that. You can set it up within Squirrel to pull from, well, within the XDC to pull from multiple report tabs and be able to find based on parameters that you want to set up. So in the different report tabs, the way it correlates is we have the, in this example, a closer, we have that column in every single report tab, because that's basically our primary key. If you want to look at it as the database term, it's your primary key for every different report tab. And luckily, all the data sets had date columns, so we were able to implement the date filter to work with it all the way across as well. But what about the refresh? So as I mentioned earlier, XDC does not, it's not a live data connection. It's the layman's terms, it's not live. You have to tell that XDC when to go and grab the up-to-date data. Now, InfoBurst allows that with scheduling, and you can do that either by how many, every hour on the hour, every 20 minutes, every 10 minutes. You can set it up to be on a parameter refresh, a action refresh. You can basically tell InfoBurst to refresh it whenever and however you want. For this instance, we set it to once a day and ran with it. And then it ended up coming back saying, well, we're changing data here, but we're not seeing it in the dashboard because it was only refreshing once a day. So they were changing records, updating records throughout the day, and they would go to the dashboard and it's like, that's not what I entered. What's going on? So we ended up switching it to every hour on the hour, and that seemed to be sufficient. The thing to take away from this is when an XDC is refreshing, everything stops. So if you're on the dashboard when the XDC is running its refresh, that dashboard is no longer going to pop. Everything is going to be blank because it can't talk right now. That XDC is refreshing. 9 times out of 10, the XDC refreshes so fast, no one's going to hit that point. Like this one, I think takes a minute and 10 seconds, and it's refreshed. Everything's up and running again. So the kind of the takeaway from that is just make sure you are scheduling this at a proper time or interval, whatever it may be, to where it's not going to run into problems with people trying to get work done and they are sitting there working on it and it dies on them. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. And like I said, 9 times out of 10 it runs so fast that no one's ever going to really notice, or you're never really going to run into an overlap problem. So the point to all of this was really, the central point was getting off of reports, but not dismissing what was already there. You don't have to build dashboards with Webi Reports. You don't have to go into the mindset of, I have to create brand new reports. I have to do all this in Webi, then I have to build this and I have to build that. You can use all existing. You may have to scope just, a little bit, like I mentioned before, where the query panel, we remove the parameters off of it just to bring in more data. But you'll discover that as you go, because with this one especially, you have the idea in your head, you have the requirements outlined by who you're building it for, and you start going, you start getting it together, and then you can run into, oh, that's cool, but can we pull in this? Can we pull in this data? What about this data? Let's add this, let's add this. You kind of get those wheels to start turning, and that's when you kind of go, well, we don't have that on the original reports, but we have it available, so you just build a new one or you add it to it and just start fine tuning. But the long scheme of things is you don't have to start from scratch. And this did solve that create a central location. So now that this dashboard is built, it's hosted, we've got it refreshing at a great interval. Everybody literally just goes to where that dashboard's hosted, and they all look at that. It's no longer delivering reports. It's no longer having to do multiple different things, multiple different views. Everybody just comes to this one-stop location. So you can imagine that helps with the VO licensing and all that consumption, because now you don't have people having to log into BusinessObjects. If they were logging to BusinessObjects, you don't have to worry about delivering as PDF or other formats like that. The data, again, automated data refresh. No one has to do anything on that in the back end. And then the unlimited user access is the big thing. So Squirrel, it does not charge by views or who's accessing at a time. So you could have 5 people looking at the same time, 10, 20, whatever you want. Because Squirrel, it's determined by how many projects you want to have live at a time. That's it. So that also saves tremendous cost and really just benefits users and developers together. Oh, that's how far I want to go. So the key takeaways and things that were learned were, how much time are you really investing in sending out reports, creating the different views, the different hierarchy views, getting all that filtering set up, getting it figured out how you want, and then getting it delivered. And then the second half of that is, what do you see in those reports? Is it just a big old data dump? Even if it's filtered, is it just data, big old data dump? Are there charts? Are those reports able to provide strong business decisions? And that was the big ticket here, was not really a lot was able to be visible. So a lot of questions were able to be answered with the dashboard, and a lot more was able to be viewed with the dashboard, because that's when you can start doing trends, doing time intervals. How long has this stuff, have these accounts been open? How long have they been sitting? Good, bad, all that type of different thing, all those type of different things. Having the reports does make building the dashboard a lot easier, because you're already familiar with the data. The data is there. It's semi-structured, and you don't have to go find it. That's the biggest thing. Because I know for me personally, trying to find the data and figure out, can we get it or how can we get it, takes time. It just, layman's terms, it takes time. It always takes time. Another big thing was making everyone happy. Offering a one-stop shop, you'd be surprised how happy that makes all the different departments, all the different levels. It's no longer hey, I need a report about this, that was entered in an hour ago, or hey, I need another report because I need to do a presentation to Joe and Jane in an hour, type of thing. It's there. So it's not one of those things where you're questioning, do I have the right data? Oh no, it's the right data, because it's there, it's built, it's refreshing. And then the last thing that I wanted to harp on is, it doesn't have to be elaborate. You see out there either with Squirrel or a custom developed application. Something, it's got all these bells and whistles. It's cool. It does this crazy, all these crazy interactions and all these bells and whistles. Sometimes less is more. Are you answering the questions that need to be answered? Are you providing proper business intelligence compared to just a standard report delivery? And does it allow the users to work effectively? If you check those boxes off, then I think then you just delivered something that's perfect. And they can always evolve. Obviously, as things get delivered or things get used, you're going to start getting feedback. And that's how dashboards grow. You don't have to sit there and try to check off all the boxes right at the beginning, because a lot of those boxes you're not going to know until it gets implemented. But again, sometimes less is more. You don't necessarily need a bunch of bells and whistles, because there's only so much you can do, and being able to just get what you need up there to provide that solution is what counts. Cool. So, any questions? Cool. Well, thank you. That's it.